What's up, WordPress nerds? In today's video, we're going to be doing a very simple headless WordPress project with NEXTJS. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make sure you get notified of my weekly WordPress videos. And on top of that, if you're interested in any sort of caching plugin for your WordPress site, make sure to check out WPGRAPHQL, which is my favorite plugin for caching for WordPress. There is a link in the description. If you end up buying a license, I get a little bit of a kickback. All right, so what we've got here is I have a local WordPress site, headless wp-next.local, and this is going to serve as our CMS. It's going to be where our content lives. And then we're going to be using NEXTJS to render that content. And so all we really have to do with this WordPress site is just make sure that we have a GraphQL server that's going to be able, that we can hit with NEXTJS and read the content from. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new plugin, and we're going to search for WPGRAPHQL. And it is a plug-and-play plugin that will spin up a GraphQL server for us. All we have to do is activate it. And then now we've got this lovely GraphQL button down here with a graphical IDE, so we can play with creating queries and things like that right here. So now over here on the right, we can see exactly what these queries will output. So we can use that in our Next.js app. And speaking of our Next.js app, let's make sure that we have Node installed. So let's do node-v. And I'm on 15.4 as the recording of this video. And you're going to need Node as well in order to follow along here. So if you need to install Node, just simple Google search and you can just install it right away. So in order to get started, we're going to run npx create-next-app. It's going to ask us a question about what we want to call our project. I'm going to call this headless WP Next video. And that is going to install it in the current directory that I'm at underneath that project name as a folder name. So this should be fairly quick here. I'll pause the video while it does its thing. All right, now that it's done, it says that we suggest that you try typing cd headless wp next video. Oh, I probably should spell it right. And then it says to run npm run dev, which is great. If we open that up, we should see that beautiful Next.js default page, which we do. All right, let's cancel all that, and I make sure that I open this. All right, there we go. Now we'll run npm run dev. That way I've got all my files over here on the right. Can't start without those. But kind of like as we're seeing here up over here, like it's just got our homepage here, and then it just kind of links off to the documentation and all that. What we want to be doing is we want to, let's start off with creating a list of posts that you can visit. Kind of like on your homepage, you have a list of the posts that are available to your readers. So we have Goodbye Mars and Hello World. So let's just start by creating a new index page. If we go under pages, we have an index.js, and this is all the stuff that we see over here. So we're just going to straight up and we're going to delete everything that we see inside of here. The way that Next.js works is that you need to export a component that is going to serve as the page that you're in. So we're in the index.js. So let's export a function. Call it home. This is going to take some data, but we'll get to that in just a second. And let's return just an h1 and call this hello from the home page. Let's hit save and go back over here, refresh, and now we've got our hello from the home page. And you can kind of continue on with that if you wanted to make an about.js and all that kind of stuff. You can absolutely do that. But we want to fetch our content dynamically. We want to make sure that we can make a page for every single item that we have in our database here in WordPress. Before we get to that, we want to fetch all of those pages and then display them here on the home page so people can click on them and visit each page individually. So the way that there's a couple different ways that you can go about rendering content, but we want to pull this information dynamically. And so in order to pass information into here that we can then use, we need to use a function or export a function asynchronously. And it's specific to NEXTJS. This is a function that you need to type in exactly like this. It's called getStaticProps. And what this will do is that we can run our query inside of here. We can go query our GraphQL server that's being housed over here. We can double check that, make sure that's working by going to /wpgraph or just GraphQL. And if some of this error message pops up, that means that it's working correctly. So we have a place that we can go query. So let's copy and paste this over so you don't watch me mess up typing it. But we're just using the fetch API. We're going to await the fetch. We're going to fetch that GraphQL URL, and we're going to post to it. We're going to send over some JSON, and that JSON looks a little bit like this. So the body is going to be json.stringify, and we're going to have an object with a key of query, and that query is going to be this string. And let's take the one, let's create that query over here so we don't just use the one that I had pre-made. Let's delete this so you can kind of see what it looks like. Let's delete everything inside of here. So we have a query of homepage query. And over here on the left, we can kind of cherry pick the information that we want. So we have posts right here. We can click into that. Let's grab the nodes from there, and then let's grab the slug, because we're going to use that as the href and in our links to those pages, and we're going to use the title as the text for those links. So if we hit run up here at the top, it comes back with an object that has our slug and title for every one of the pages. So let's take this query and let's go and just replace this here. So that's going to be fetched, and we should get this exact object that we see over here. And we want to take that response that we're getting, and we want to turn that into JSON. So if you worked with the fetch API, this should look very familiar. So we're going to await for that response, and we're going to turn it into a JSON. And what we want to do is we want to take all that information that we got, and we want to return it. We want to return it, return an object with a key of props, and inside of that, it's got an object with a key of posts. And that's going to be the JSON data posts of what we just got from the server. And through magic, NEXTJS grabs this getStaticProps, the result of it, and passes it here. So what we can do is we can set that as variable and get posts from that. And let's just change that. No, let's keep that, and let's just do a div around it so it won't yell at us. So we'll have hello from the home page. And let's just double check to make sure that this is looking good. So let's console log posts. Let's go back over here. And it looks like, oh, we are not going to be able to see that. We've got an object coming back. And it's got posts, and inside there's two nodes, and one has this information in it of Goodbye Mars, and the other one has that of Hello World. So now this is ours to do whatever we want with. So let's just map over it and create a list of our posts. So let's do post.posts nodes.map, and we're going to use the post inside of each one. And then we're going to return a UL. We're going to make sure that we need a key for that, and that's just going to be post.slug. That's going to be unique. We're going to have an li in here, and let's do post.title. Let's get rid of that. Post.title. So we go back here. Now we have 2 items in our unordered list. We have Goodbye Mars and Hello World. So far so good. We have a list of the pages that we would eventually like to visit. And we'll come back here when we want to actually link them to those pages, because right now they don't exist. So the next thing that we're going to do is, now that we know how to query for information and then display that information, let's create a couple of dynamic pages. So we have this pages folder, and it's very easy to create additional pages in here, and you can do some pretty interesting things with it. What we want to do is we want to have our structure look a little bit like this. If I'm going to come back over here, and it's going to look something like my site.com/post/ the slug of whatever our page is. In this case, it'll be like hello world, something like that. Hello world. And so NEXTJS makes it very easy to accomplish that. So all we have to do is create a folder in here called posts. And so that'll give us that first level in our URL structure. And then we're going to create a new file in here, and we're going to use square brackets. And it's going to be called slug.js. It's very specific to that. NEXTJS is going to know what we're talking about here, is that we want to use the slug. And so inside of here, we can, we're going to be doing some of the things that we just saw a second ago, but we're going to add on top of it a little bit. The first thing that we want to do is we want to export default our function called post. And that's going to eventually receive some data, right? Because we're going to have to query for each individual post. And so let's do what we did earlier and grab the getStaticProps function here. So let's paste that in just below it. And we want to query GraphQL for an individual post. Now it's a little bit more difficult to do that back here in the IDE because we're going to be working with variables. So I'm going to kind of just paste this in as I've got it written over here in my notes, and I'll explain it to you as it becomes important. So inside of this getStaticProps, we need to query, close that over there, our GraphQL endpoint. We're going to post to it. We're going to send it some JSON. And in that JSON, we're going to stringify an object. And it has 2 keys in here. One is query and the other is variables. Now, variables is going to be an object that has 2 items in it. The first is going to be ID. It's going to be context param slug. getStaticProps passes in an item called context. And inside of there, you can grab the slug of the current page that you're on. So if we are on, let's see, I've got this, mysite.com/post/hello world. We're going to get hello world right there for that slug. And so what we can do is we can query WordPress through GraphQL and grab a post with that slug. Now, there's other ways that you can query posts. You can do it by ID, like database ID or like global IDs or stuff like that. So you need to tell it what type of ID we're working with. And in this case, we are working with a slug. So we can grab the slug and tell it that we're working with a slug right there inside of the variables object. And then we've got the query. Now we need to pass those variables into here, into our single post query, and then use those variables right here. And we're going to grab the title, the slug, the content, the featured image, and that source URL for that image. Hopefully that makes sense. Once we get that, we're going to turn the results of that into JSON. Let's collapse this. We're going to turn that into JSON. And then we're going to do something very similar to what we just did. We're going to return some props with the individual post data inside of it. Now, that's only for that individual page. Now, what we need to do in addition to that is we need to tell NEXTJS what paths we want to make sure get created when the build happens. So we know that when we visit that page, we need to grab this information, but we need to make sure that those pages are created at build time, because what we're going to do is we're going to pre-render all of these components. So when we do npx or npm run build, it's going to run this query, see that we have 2 pages, and it's going to build a page for each one, and then it's going to run get static props on each of those pages and grab the content for each of those pages, if that makes sense. So we need to tell next that when somebody goes to, or when we build, we need to build all of our posts. So there's another function that's built in, just like getStaticProps is built in, and it's called getStaticPaths. So we need to build all the paths out for our site here for this particular route. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to, let's create another query here. Actually, we've kind of built a couple of queries, so let's just copy and paste it in. You guys know how to create a query. So we're going to query our GraphQL server. It's going to be post. We're going to use the method of post. We're going to send over some JSON, and our query here is going to be called allPostsQuery. And we're going to be grabbing all of the nodes. I think we only really need the slug here, but I grabbed some extra information for some reason. Maybe I'm forgetting why, and then I'll run into it in a minute. So we're going to get all of the posts in our WordPress website. And then we're going to take that. We're going to return some JSON. We're going to get some JSON back. We're going to wait that. And then we are going to just kind of dig into that a little bit to make it a little bit easier. We're going to just assign a constant, and we're going to make that equal to json.data.post.nodes because it's a lot of levels deep, and it makes it a little bit easier. And then what we need to do is we need to return a set of paths. So we need to assign paths right here. We're going to assign fallback to false, because if we don't, it messes a lot of stuff up because we don't have any fallback set up. So it's just going to 404 if it can't find what it's looking for. But we need to set up some paths. And so what we need to do is create an array of paths. So we're going to create an array of paths like this. We're going to take this post variable, we're going to map over it, and we're going to return an object with params, and it's going to set the slug to the slug that we got back from our query up here. And so that will give us an array of paths that NEXTJS will then build for us. So once we've gotten that should, when we run build, it should create all those, and then when we visit each page, it knows exactly what to grab. So let's just console log some of the stuff that we got here. So let's just return just an H1. This is howdy again. And let's console log data. All right. So let's go back here and visit. our site. Let's do /post/hello world. So we've got howdy. And we have an object that we can look at. So data, posts, it's got our content in there. Welcome to WordPress. This is your first post. Our featured image, which has our URL in there. And it's got our slug and our title. Let's close out of that and let's actually render this out. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is, well, let's just get rid of this. We need to wrap everything in a div. And let's have our new constant here. We're just going to make this data.post because I like working with post a little bit better. And we're going to have an h1 up here, and that's going to be post.title. And we're going to have an article where we're going to dangerously set the inner HTML of post.content. So now we get hello world and welcome to WordPress. So if we were to do goodbye Mars, we have goodbye Mars and another post for us to work with. Another thing that I think is worth noting here is that Next gives us a component for working with images. And now there's a lot that we can go over here, but long story short, it's a component that you can use just like this. You have it, you open it, you give it a width and a height and the source. And so we're going to do post.featuredimage.node.source URL, which we just saw a second ago. We're going to hit save. We're going to refresh. Oops, invalid source prop. Yep, and this is something that I was actually expecting. I was unexpectedly expecting this. So Next is very careful to make sure that you're only bringing in images that they're from trusted sources. And so there is a Next config file that we need to create. Next.config.js. Let's paste this in here. Module.exports images, domains, headless WP next.local. Just making sure that the stuff that you're bringing your images in are trusted. So we're going to cancel out of that run dev, and we're going to restart it so it knows about our whitelisted domain here. So now we have goodbye Mars. We've got our image in there, and then our content down below. So very cool. Now we can visit these posts manually just by changing the URL. But let's go back to our home page just to kind of wrap things up. Now we can't click on any of these, which is unfortunate. So what we've got is we can use a component in Next called link. And this makes it so when you are visiting links internally, it'll kind of do some magic to make them load a little bit faster. It'll prefetch them, and it'll kind of feel like a single page app. So it does some pretty good stuff there. And so we're going to replace this li with link. So we're going to need the li as well. We don't want to replace it. So we have our li, and then we have link, and then it's going to have an href, and you're just going to say /posts, and then the post slug, and then inside of there, the post title. So if we refresh this, we should now be able to click on these. So if I click on goodbye Mars, it'll take us to goodbye Mars. And if I click on hello world, it takes us to hello world. Now we can, npm run build, and it'll statically create these pages for us. And it'll make it so that all this can be deployed to a server as static HTML, and it makes it extremely fast. And this is an extremely easy way to kind of get up and running with Next.js. So I hope you guys learned something in this. I know this is very simple. It's meant to just kind of get us up and running with it, and I would absolutely love to continue this. I just want to make sure that this is something that you guys are actually interested in it before, I put all the work into going over all this, because not only does Next.js statically generate pages just like we've seen. And we can kind of see right here, if we were to look at, our pages, posts, our Goodbye Mars HTML, it has all of that static HTML just, written out there for us. But you can also do things on the server side. So like, let's say you have a page that's, looking at stocks or Bitcoin prices or something like that, and it needs to be updated every time somebody refreshes or something like that. There's ways that you can fetch this information from WordPress dynamically and on every single page load. So you're not having to rerun a build every time that you need to update information. So there's lots of things to go over, and I would love to continue this. Just let me know in the comments below if this is something you're interested in. I'd like to say thank you to my patrons who have been supporting me, and if you guys are interested in becoming a patron, I do exclusive videos just about every month on more advanced topics like this, about deploying WordPress with Git, setting up. We're going to be doing JS testing with Cypress here in just a little bit, and all sorts of good other things, and I'm open to suggestions as well. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.